If you want to catch more bass this summer, then this is the video for you. Today I'm going to be showing you my top 3 summer bass fishing lures and how to use them. Let's get right into it. Alright, as you can see, we've made it to the pond, and right here in front of me, I have pretty much the only 3 rods that you're going to need this summer if you want to catch not only a lot of bass, but a ton of big bass as well. So let's get right into it. Alright, so we've got the first rod out right here, and this is going to be the first of kind of 3 baits that are my favorite go-to lures for the summer. And I'm out here, one of my favorite little secluded, small little ponds I just walked up to. And today I'm not only going to be trying to catch some big fish and a bunch of fish for you guys, but I'm also going to be sharing a ton of tips on how to catch some big fish and a lot of fish in the hot summer months. I know it can be a difficult time to fish for bass just because once it gets too hot, sometimes they get a little bit lethargic and hard to catch. But with these 3 baits, I found that you can still get on a ton of fish and a lot of big fish as well. So let's start off with the first, kind of the most recognizable one, the most simple one, but still a super effective bait. And that is going to be the tried and true finesse worm that I have right here. And right now I just have a small 5-inch finesse worm rigged up on a small, tiny little finesse wacky rig. But there are a ton of other ways that you can fish this bait that are just as effective in the summer months. So let's start out with this bait, try to catch a few fish, and then I'll kind of go in a little bit more in depth on how I'm fishing this and why it is so effective and kind of the other ways you can fish it as well. So I'm going to start out just pitching up shallow near some of these grass lines and see if we can't catch one pretty quickly. Let's get right into it. All right, so as I'm looking up the bank with this little wacky rig, I don't think it should take too long for me to find some aggressive fish. Basically what I'm looking for is some of these fallen trees and grass lines that are right up shallow. And in this pond, there are just a ton of fallen trees. As you can see, I'm standing on one right now, and that's going to extend all the way out underneath this tree. So pretty much every time I see an area like this, oh, that's fish. Yep. Just where he should have been. Yep. And it's, oh my gosh, that is a tiny little bass. I thought that was a bluegill at first, but that is just a tiny little bass right where he should have been. All right, number 1 in the day, just a dinky little guy. I thought he was a bluegill at first. Just yanked him out of the water. A little bit too aggressive on that hook set, maybe. Just throw this guy right back in. Just a small little guy, but that is a great start to the day for this wacky rig. This is kind of the bait that I'm just going to fish for the first 10-15 minutes, see what's happening, see how aggressive these fish are. But as I said, just a little finesse worm on a wacky rig. And what's going to happen when you cast this in the water around some of these, what I like to call high probability areas where there should be fish, grass line, structure, shade, anything like that. When you cast it on there and you just let it sink, what I like doing with this bait is pretty much just throwing it out and dead sticking it. And essentially what that means is pretty much as you expect. Throw it out to a spot that you think there's going to be a fish up shallow and literally let it sit. That bait is just going to shimmy down in the water, and it's going to slowly sink. These bass, especially when they're more lethargic in hot water, they're just going to come over. Maybe they'll nose up to it, and a lot of times they can't resist it. And even if they are super aggressive, that initial splash and drop is still going to make them come over to the bait. Finesse worm can also be fished in a couple different ways. I like fishing on a wacky rig when I'm fishing a super shallow pond like this, because it's not going to take too long to get to the bottom, and it's going to be super effective. We can also fish this on a Texas rig, either weighted or weightless, but also a Carolina rig, something super effective for deep water, slowly moving that bait. And of course a Nico rig, even a Ned rig, something that could be super effective when fishing a wacky rig. But this area is something prime that I'm going to look for in any sort of pond or lake that I'm fishing. There's a ton of structure in the water that's going to be cover for a fish that's going to be able to hide in it and ambush its prey. There's also some shade from these overhanging trees. Of course, the sun is not too high, so the shade isn't going to be too much of a factor right now. But areas like this just should have fish. That was a tap on my line right there. So anytime I see one, I'm going to take a few casts on it. Oh, that one took the whole bait, I think. He's got it. Yep, and another little guy. I will take it. He's digging, though. He's digging. Get up here, buddy. All right, that guy took the whole bait. As you can see, they're a little bit less aggressive today than I was kind of hoping. I'm getting a ton of short strikes, a ton of fish that are just taking the end of the bait and just running with it. That's why I've lost a few lures. I've kind of, as you can see on this one, took the kind of tail end of it. But another reason this bait is so effective, once again, that is an absolute dink. Number 2 on the day, just another little dinker. And that may have been a little bit harsh. Usually I like to release them a little bit nicer than that, but there's number 2, solid fish again, just a little dinker. nothing to write home about, but if you want to get on some bites, this is just a tiny, I believe this is a 4-inch finesse worm. And a small pond like this, it is a ton of fun, and you can get on big fish, but you're gonna catch even more big fish consistently on the second bait, which you're gonna get right into here in about 30 seconds. Let's take 3 more casts with this bait, then switch it up. Let's go. All right, so we have rod number 2 and bait number 2 in our hands right here. And bait number 2 is not gonna be the spinner bait as it looks like right here, but it's gonna be what's on the back of the spinner bait, and that is a paddle tail swim bait. This is just a 3.3-inch paddle tail swim bait that I have trailing my spinner bait. And one of the reasons this paddle tail swim bait is so effective is because of its versatility. It can be used on its own, on either a jig head or a weighted swim bait head. That's super effective. I'm probably gonna end up switching to that technique in just a few minutes. But it can also be effectively used as a trailer for something like a buzz bait, a spinner bait, like I have tied on right here, a chatter bait, a swim jig, a bunch of different variety of baits you can add bulk to and add a little action from that paddle tail. So let's fish this a little bit and kind of get into the tips. Hopefully, if I can catch a couple fish on this. This is a big profile bait to be throwing in a small pond like this, but couldn't help but give it a try. Oh, yep, there's a fish. That was second cast. Oh, another little guy. I will take it though. Another little dinky one. We upsized the bait and we're still catching some dinky little bass. It's probably the best one of the day. That is not saying too much, but another one. Absolutely cranked the spinner bait this time with that paddle tail swim bait on the back. Let's get this guy right back in the water. Now that I know that's going to be effective today, I can safely talk about some of the tips that I have with this bait. Just another, I mean, super healthy fish. Look how chunky that guy is. And a swift release right back in the water. That's how we like it. May have mishandled him slightly, but that was, I think, second cast. As I was talking about how it may not work because of how big it is in this pond, but of course, that did not take very freaking long before a fish absolutely cranked it. So let's keep going up this bank and I'll kind of go into depth about why I like this bait so much. All right, so as I said, this is a spinner bait. We've got that 3.3-inch paddle tail swim bait as a trailer on the back. I'm doing some pretty similar things with this bait that I was with the wacky rig. And that is in terms of where I'm casting. I'm gonna be casting at grass lines, a structure in the water, the high probability areas that I've been talking about all freaking video. Some of the most important things is where you cast the bait. And it's these high probability areas that you're gonna get the most bites. But the reason I like fishing a paddle tail swim bait so much is because it is so freaking versatile. On the back of this spinner bait, you're gonna get a ton of shine from those blades. You're gonna get a ton of action back and forth from that paddle tail going kind of around. If you're finding that you're not getting bites on a spinner bait like this, you can downsize your bait to something like a chatterbait or a swim jig, which is still gonna have a little more bulk from some of these kind of skirts. As you can see, these little rubber band, that's a little skirt. It's still gonna have a skirt, but it's not gonna have these blades on it, so it's not gonna be quite as bulky in the water. And you can even downsize even more to just a pure jig head with that paddle tail on the back and even fish more finesse-like with this bait. When I'm fishing this, it's pretty simple. Cast it out there, slow, steady retrieve, nothing too crazy. If I'm fishing this on the back of any sort of bait like a spinner bait, chatterbait, swim jig, it's a slow retrieve. Don't get too crazy with it. If I'm fishing on its own on a jig head, that's when we can kind of play with it a little bit more. Sometimes I like dragging it on the bottom. Sometimes I'll hop that bait, kind of jig it up like you would with a jig or like a Texas rig or even a Ned rig, some kind of action like that. But it's just so effective. Imitates just a little bait fish coming across these fish's face. Slow action, nothing too crazy. They're still gonna be able to eat it. So let's get on some more fish before we get on to bait number 3, which is the most fun bait you can throw in the summer. Let's get right back in there. There's fish on instantly. Maybe a little bit better. I'll take it. Oh no, he came off. That probably would have been the best one of the day. It was nothing too crazy. Probably about like a just over 1 pounder. Absolutely cranked it. Cast that bait in pretty much as soon as it hit the water. Don't have too much time. I came here probably with about hour 15 of light left. So we don't have too much time here to fish before it gets too dark outside to really film and fish, especially when I've got to walk a ways back to my car. But, oh, there's another fish. Oh my gosh. This bait is getting absolutely cranked. I walked over to the other side of the pond, and it seems like there are a ton of aggressive fish up in these stumps and around these overhanging trees. Oh my gosh. And that is one of them. Holy crap. That guy absolutely cranked it. Oh my gosh. I was pulling the bait out of the water, nearly broke my rod because I high sticked it, and he was barely hooked. And he was almost not hooked at all. Best one of the day. That is not saying much, but I think we're kind of coming into the area, or maybe the time frame window, where these fish are being a little bit more aggressive. And that paddle tail swim bait paired up with that spinner bait is what's doing them. Well, it's not every day that you have a fish pretty much eat your bait when it's out of the water, when you're pulling it up for a new cast. Like I said, nearly high sticked my rod right there because I almost had no line out. I had to let some line out before I could bring that fish up. Let's keep fishing this bait. Obviously, at least in that spot, there were 2-3 fish that were keying in on this presentation. Yep, got another one, got another one. He's a little bit bigger, I think. Get up here, buddy. Another just not a big fish, but another solid one that just absolutely cranked it. Watched that fish take that bait in, waited a second, set the hook, and he freaking nailed that bait. All right, another little guy. What's that? 3 for the spinner bait? Something like that. And a bunch of freaking bites. Let's go down to the water. Slowly, just barely toss that guy in there. But that is a nice freaking start with this spinner bait. All right, so we've made it through the first 2 baits, and we've gotten to the long-awaited bait number 3, my favorite bait, the most exciting bait to throw in the summer, a bait that's gonna get on a big fish and get on a ton of super fun bites. And a lot of you probably guessed it. That is the topwater frog. It is a topwater hollow belly frog. It is a surface bait, hence the name topwater. It's gonna sit on top of the water, and it is one of the most effective baits to catch big fish in the summer. What makes this bait so special is because in the summer, as you know, there's usually a ton of grass, both in the water and on top of the water. And this bait is hollow body with the hooks totally weedless on top of this bait. This bait is going to be able to float on top of any of that grass on top of the water and be completely free and totally ready for a big fish to take it. The one problem I have about this pond is there's almost no grass on top. This is one of the few exceptions of a summer pond that's not going to have a ton of growth on top, which may make it a little bit more difficult to throw this bait, but I can still definitely give it a go. I'll try and give you a few of my tips and tricks on how to catch some fish with it. So let's get right in there with bait number 3, the topwater frog. My favorite bait, most exciting bait to catch fish on in the summer. Let's get right into it. I think we can get this going. Anyway, when I throw a topwater frog like this, I like to find an area with a ton of grass and throw right up on the edge of it. This way I can kind of go up onto the grass, come up off, and this bait is gonna imitate not only a frog, but any sort of injured bait fish on the top of the water. And for whatever reason, especially in the summer, it is so effective at getting big freaking bites. I'm fishing just a regular topwater hollow belly frog right here, but there's also a popping frog, which has just a little hollowed out area in the front, which is gonna allow you to pull it through the water, and it's gonna pop water up. This regular frog is probably the best one to go through grass because it's a little bit more weedless, even though they're both some of the most weedless baits you can throw. And this one you can either just drag up and pop it through the water like that, or you can walk it, which is a little bit more difficult, but still super effective. The one drawback with this bait is the hookup ratio. Even if you're super good at fishing, you've fished it for a long time, you are still gonna have some fish that you're gonna set the hook and the hooks are not gonna penetrate through. That's just what happens when you're fishing with a frog. But what I like to do is just throw it out there. Obviously there's no grass in this pond to kind of act as an example to where I would cast. I'm reeling it in. Let's say I got a bite right there. You see the fish come up and just destroy the bait. That's why it's so fun to use, because you can watch the fish come up and eat it and just destroy that bait on top. I'm gonna wait a few seconds, reel out all the slack in my line, make sure there's tension, then I'm gonna set it. That extra 2 seconds can be the difference between you catching your personal best and between it just being a fishing story. So let's fish this bait a little bit, see if I can lock in my walking action, since I haven't thrown this bait in just a little bit, and maybe catch a big one. Oh my gosh, Holy crap. Oh, that was insane. I casted my frog out, and of course, I'm checking my phone, making sure it's in my pocket. I have very shallow pockets, and oh, he tried to eat it again. And of course, I'm just kind of fixing it. All of a sudden, I hear my bait just get cranked. Oh, we got that. Oh, no, I missed him. I missed him. I think it is a tiny freaking bass. That is the one thing about this bait. If you want to catch tiny half-pound bass like I've been catching all day, you're not going to hook up on them very much with the frog. If I threw on a tiny popper, that fish would be on the bank right now. That's a great sign that they're looking up into the water, into the top of the water, onto the surface. Oh, there's fish, no way. On the popper. It is a tiny fish. Why are they so dang aggressive and tiny in this pond? Oh my gosh. And he cranked it right up shallow. Now these are the guys you have to be careful about with hooking yourself with a little topwater with 6 hooks on it. 2 trebles like this. On the popper, I know this is a, oh, is he back in there? I think I can still grab him. I know this is a top 3 summer bass fishing lures. And of course, the topwater frog was on there and not the popper. But this looks so freaking good. The topwater frog is still number 3 on that list, or top 3 on that list. But it's just too freaking good looking to not throw a popper. When I'm throwing that frog, I love to throw it near grass. In open water, topwater popper, which is what I'm just throwing right here, is something very similar in terms of it's a slower moving topwater bait. And it's very effective. That is an absolute micro bass, but he does catch big ones as well. Let's get this guy back. First one on the topwater bait. I guess I could change here. Let's get this guy back first. And there he goes, right back in the water. I could change the kind of third bait into more of a category of baits, which is just topwater lures. These topwater lures are so effective in the summer. I think I'm just gonna keep it to just the topwater frog. Even though we only got maybe 3-4 bites on it, we didn't catch any fish. Most of them were small. It just looked too good to not throw a topwater popper. We've got calm conditions right now. The sun is setting. There's not too much grass, so I don't really need to worry about it being weedless with a frog. So I'm just kind of, what I'm doing with this popper, sometimes what you like to do is just do that. Big, aggressive pops, slow moving, and you'll get some hits like that. What I like to use a popper is more of a kind of walking bait popper hybrid. And that's just quick twitches. That bait is gonna walk like this across the top of water, and it's also gonna splash out. It's a little bit more subtle of an action than those big heavy pops. But when I'm fishing calm water like this, just that little disturbance on top is usually enough to get some of these fish to absolutely crank it. Oh my gosh, that was freaking cool. That was freaking cool. It is an, oh, he's snagged up, oh, he's out. He's out, another little guy. I mean, we are definitely destroying these absolutely microfish with everything we throw at them, whether that be a topwater popper. Let me get my pliers. We have been plagued with the just microfish out of this pond. This is actually the second time I've come to this same pond in the last, I don't know, week or so. So we've kind of been plagued, if you saw my last video, with just microfish. I will take it. As you can see, sun is rapidly setting. Here's probably not too much light left on this GoPro. Let's hold the fish up there in the light, so you can see him. But got 10-15 minutes maximum to find a big one. I mean, healthy freaking fish. They are not like super unhealthy stunted fish, but they are small. And there he goes.